Now, if we're talking about a good screening tool, let's just stick with that for a minute. It needs to have the following qualities. Any good screening tool, it doesn't matter whether it's a scan or a blood test, it needs to have high sensitivity for small cancers, meaning you can detect small cancers. It must be cost effective, which is one of the questions about MRI. Is it cost effective because it's expensive? And we don't yet know how effective it is anyway. And it needs to be safe and acceptable to the population being screened. Those are the things that we look at when we look at, is a screening tool a good one or not? So let's talk about thermography a bit, because I know some of you don't know about it. What is it? Sorry. Thermography is looking for heat coming from the breast tissue. Now, back as far as the 1950s, a guy called Lawson, Dr. Lawson, discovered that breast cancers generate heat. And he was able to see that the breast cancer generated heat, but the surrounding tissue didn't. So he was probably the first to describe that in the 1950s. Arguably, before that, Hippocrates found that a pathological area dried first when you spread mud on a patient. So that meant that the hotter area was drying first, right? So there's something about pathology and heat, and there's something definitely about cancers that we know generate heat. Why do they generate heat? Because they're highly metabolic, for a start, so they're more metabolically active than normal cells. That generates heat. And also, most cancers, in order to nurture their growth, have what we call an angiogenesis, or new blood vessel formation, and that increased circulation nurtures their growth, but also generates heat. Useful if you're looking to detect heat and not structure. So what is thermography? Basically, infrared camera that picks up heat coming from the body surface. That's what it does. And we now have the technology to measure temperature differences right down to 0.025 degrees centigrade with modern digital infrared thermography. So highly sensitive equipment. Has it been approved? Well, you might be surprised to know that the FDA approved it in 1982 to be used alongside other screening tools. And yet, half of you in this audience didn't even know about it. What are the differences? Well, I would argue, and the studies would support, that it's early stage detection. We think it gives us a 6 to 10 year advantage over mammograms. Why? Because we're looking for physiological change, heat generation from a smaller tumor, or maybe even a precancerous lesion. So we're looking for heat, we're not looking for structural change. So that's what I've said there. We're recording this metabolic process. An abnormal thermogram is the single most important marker of high risk for developing breast cancer, and I'll show you some data on that in a minute. It is 10 times more significant than having a family history of breast cancer. Just think about that for a minute. That if you have an abnormal thermogram, the studies support that it's 10 times more significant than having a family history of it. Studies have shown that if you combine thermography with mammography, it can lead to a 61% increase in survival rate. So we shouldn't be just throwing this out of the window, because that's what some of the studies have shown. It's also 100% safe, risk-free. There's no radiation. It's only detecting heat coming from the body. No ionizing radiation. And, ladies, no compression required. So it's like having your photo taken, except we're using an infrared camera rather than a normal camera. And here's the other beauty. It can be used to screen young women, because it doesn't matter how dense the breast tissue is. We're not looking for structure. We're looking for heat changes. So we can screen younger women. Bonus. So earlier detection, measuring heat, can screen younger women. 2 early detection advantages. And you doctors in the audience will want to know this, I know especially. Is it scientifically validated? Well, there are over 1,000 peer-reviewed studies on breast thermography in medical literature, and some of these have followed patients for up to 12 years. And for those of you, I don't have time to cover all of them, but I've written 2 review papers on this. So for those of you who are technically minded and want to know the science, you talk to one of my staff after, and we'll send you a PDF of those articles, should you want to see those. I'll be touching on a couple of the key studies now, and look how long ago that was, 1982, Spitalier and his associate. They screened 61,000 women with thermography over a 10-year period, and they were able to identify or pick up 91% of non-palpable cancers. In other words, cancers that could not be felt. Thermography picked up 91% of them. All right, let's move on. What about this study? Again, published in the 80s. Look at that. This is Gross and Guthrie. They screened 58,000 women with thermography, and the ones that had, and these were women that did not have a clinically palpable tumor. And they followed over 1,500 of women who had healthy breasts but an abnormal thermogram. Now, healthy breasts just mean you can't feel anything in the breast, but they had an abnormal thermogram. So they followed those for a number of years, and then reported that of this group, this 1,500, 40% of them developed breast cancer within 5 years. Now you may say, well, that means 60% of them with abnormal thermograms didn't develop breast cancer, but that's only a 5-year. Unfortunately, the paper didn't report beyond that, because I would have wanted to know, well, what happened at 10 years? What happened beyond that? Don't know from this study. But at 5 years, 40% with abnormal thermograms developed a breast cancer. So it's high risk. What is the sensitivity and specificity of the test? I know that sounds a bit gobbledygook to some of you. Sensitivity means true positive, and specificity, quite difficult to get your lips around that sometimes. Specificity means true negative. That means what is the chance that if it says it's positive, it really is positive, and if it's how specific is it? Is if the test says it's negative, how confident can you be that it really hasn't missed anything? In other words, true negative. Okay. Those two are very important for a screening tool. And for thermography, we think, based on all of the scientific data, somewhere between 90 and 95%, compared to mammography, which is somewhere between 60 and 70%, just for comparison. All right, what is it a good screening tool then? Let's see. Well, any technique for screening must have. Does it have high sensitivity for small cancers? Tick. Because we're not looking for structure. Is it cost effective? Tick. Because one of these units is relatively cheap compared to mammography. You just need a small infrared camera linked to a laptop and a normal room that can be cooled. It's not expensive to set up. Now, some of you ladies will be saying, well, how much does it cost to have a thermogram? And the answer is, if you come to our clinic in Harley Street, which I hope some of you do, we charge £245. Not tonight. What? Not tonight. No, I know, we'll come on to that. Some special offers going around tonight for you. But I know some of you would have been thinking that. Is it safe and acceptable to a population being screened? Yeah, because there's no radiation exposure. So, based on these three criteria, thermography gets a big tick. Now I want to show you some examples of thermograms. The first two are normal, and the following three are women who have breast cancer. So you might wonder, well, why is a woman who has breast cancer having a thermogram? Well, I asked them kindly if they wouldn't mind, because what I wanted to do is show an audience what a cancerous breast looks like on a thermogram. So let's look at these. Now this is a normal one. You see the breasts are symmetrically cool. It's normal to have heat under the breast. It's normal to have heat like that coming from the armpits. There's a little bit too much heat coming from the neck there, but I won't bore you with why that might be. Here is a thermogram as well, but it's a grayscale that allows us to see the blood vessels more easily, and that's important. So that's one of the things that we sign on. We look for temperature differences. We look for abnormal blood vessel structures. Now here's another normal one, and you can see the breasts are symmetrical. They're cool. There's cool around the nipples, and the grey scale doesn't show any abnormal blood vessels. Those dark flecks are blood vessels, but these are normal pattern. Right. The next three are women with breast cancer. Which side is the breast cancer? You're looking at this like a mirror image. It's her left, right? What I'm showing you this for is look at the abnormal blood vessel patterning here. Look at the amount of heat that that cancer is generating compared to the non-cancerous breast. It's obvious, isn't it? Now let me show you another one, different patient. Look at that. Now you can see, it's obvious here, this lady has got structural changes in her breast. You see the nipple is retracted up. Look at the vascular density around that. That's abnormal compared to the other side. Look at the heat that's being generated by that cancer. Here's another one. The other side, look at this. Look at the vascular supply to that tumor compared to the other side. And look at the heat being generated. So there's no question that when you have an existing cancer, heat is being generated. What we're saying is, of course for these ladies, it's too late a detection. But we're saying that if we can pick up some of the early temperature changes that suggest there is a stressed breast or a malign process evolving, that gives us an opportunity to get involved with that lady and change things much sooner. You follow that argument? All right, good. Okay, so this is the system that I've developed, and I've used different thermal image systems over the last 14, 15 years. This is my own system that is a computer-assisted thermography system called Thermocheck. And here you see a thermogram being done. This is one of my staff who's here tonight. There she is, she's famous. So Rachel is doing the screening. Look at the size of the camera, how small that infrared camera is. It doesn't require a big camera. They're very sensitive piece of equipment, that is, and linked to just a normal computer screen. And Thermocheck is different because we let the computer analyze all of the temperature data. So it's not a doctor sitting in front of a screen eyeballing it, which is the way it's done in some places still. But you might as well let a computer analyze all of the temperature data. It's much more accurate and much quicker and much more thorough. So that's what we do. So Thermocheck is the name you want to watch out for. Now, so what we do is we draw these grids around the breast that identifies to the computer 35 areas to compare right versus left. We let the computer do all that, much more sensitive. So that's thermography. And those are the reasons why I think it's a game changer.